what we've thought of the team so far, through their first, 50 or so games, 57 to be exact. How would you rate the Sabres season so far, sitting sixth place in the Eastern Conference, A, B, C, or D on the poll? And the winner of the poll was B at 60%, A was 33.3%, C was 6.7%, and D was 0%. Austin, what are your takeaways from the poll? And B, how would you grade the Sabres season so far?
Times have changed, right? Seeing D get 0% is not something we're used to seeing. I thought there would have been somebody facetious in there who gives him a D, but no, I think B plus is probably the right thing, right? We thought this team should be competing for a wild card spot. They're 5 points in the playoffs, like they have a 5-point cushion. Obviously, good thing because being in the playoffs as late has been awesome. I think the only thing that could have made it an A is if I don't know what it would have made it an A, because I think they're not exceeding expectations. I think at the start of the year before the puck dropped, this is kind of where we expected them to be. Then the way that the season kind of unfolded, where they started out poorly again and then kind of worked their way back into this position, is what makes it a B. Like if they had started the season properly and maybe were closer to first in the Atlantic, it's an A, I guess. I don't know, but it's been a lot of fun. Obviously, again, a lot of it probably has to do with the time of the Olympics. I miss the NHL. Like I miss NHL hockey. I miss being able to sit down on a Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday night and watch hockey rather than like a 3 p.m. thing. But the Sabres are, again, I don't know how anyone even, like, it's good that A and B were the runaway too. I don't even know how you could argue that this was a C season unless you're just really hung up on the way that they started. But having gone through everything that they've gone through, getting to see these guys play the way that they've been playing, and that's with Norris, Benson missing a boatload of time, Kesselring missing a ton of time, Dahlin and Tage. Tage at times looks like the dominant player we've seen, but not all the time. Dahlin, we clearly know with everything that's been going on, is giving it his all, but he still has another level that you were used to seeing him at. Tuck has been extremely inconsistent as well. So I think with all these injuries and inconsistencies with their best player, to be as comfortable as they are in the playoff races, yeah, you have to be satisfied with that.
Yeah, and I think what might have made this an A poll, as you mentioned, maybe a top 3 seed in the Atlantic at the break.
I mean, they are.
To be fair, yeah.
Or no, they're 2 back, I guess, with points percentage. It's close, yeah.
But as you mentioned, if they would have been first place in the division,
if the division was more in play, I guess it's an A. But a B for the Sabres is basically an A. Let's be honest.
Especially with how the first half of the season went in that 50.
Exactly. Yeah.
Kevin Adams getting fired and Jarmo Kekalainen taking over. I know technically he hasn't made any moves yet, but it was almost like an uplifting when that move happened. You saw the dressing room change, you saw the dynamic change within the organization from top to bottom. And again, just changing a general manager isn't necessarily going to, stop the Titanic from sinking, but it almost felt like it was a move that needed to be made. And now the season's gone in an upward direction, even though Jarmo's not on the ice sort of making an impact yet with any moves, but that could possibly come, as we'll talk about. But it almost felt like that move just kind of swayed that direction in the positive.
100%. I think it was Jeremy White. Jeremy White put out like the first inkling of Adams could be gone. And it's too perfect to not be purely a coincidence. There's got to be some merit to it. But the second that rumor was put out by Jeremy White, that's when the 3-game win streak started for Buffalo, where then they came home, fired Adams on the 3-game win streak. That led into the 10-game win streak, and it's kind of been all uphill from there. Like you said, he hasn't made a huge. Isn't even made. I guess Josh Doan, the contract is his move so far, but he hasn't made an addition technically to the NHL roster yet. But just having someone with respect and just having a new voice clearly was something that buoyed this team to playing the level that they're not accustomed to, because they're not accustomed to this at all, but a level that they should be playing at. And it's been great. And I think, like you said, it's now going to be time for Jarmo to get them some reinforcements, because I'm going to guess Today is Tuesday the 17th when this comes out. So is today the first day of practice? Or they got the players that are back have to start practicing soon. I know they get a little ramp up period, so we should start seeing those guys return. And it'll be interesting to see what Sabres are healthy, which ones are not, because it's been, Timmins was still on crutches. Kesselring was still dealing with something. Benson was hurt. Norris was hurt. Greenway was hurt. There's still a lot of questions surrounding this team. And by the time that Wednesday, the 25th game happens, they have 5 games before the trade deadline. And I don't know I think it was Chris Johnson said at the Four Nations last year, there was like moves on the first 4 days after the league returned from the Four Nations break. Wonder if there's going to be a flurry of moves the second these guys get back from the Olympic break. I don't know, but it's about time that Jarmo starts looking at what he can add to this team, because trade deadline's coming up fast. And that is going to be vital for Buffalo to kind of get over the hump and get this playoff push over the finish line.
Yeah, and you mentioned, like, when that trade freeze is lifted, is there going to be a backlog of trades throughout the league?
Yeah.
Right? like who knows? We saw that quick deal that the Rangers made with moving Panarin to LA like right before the trade freeze happened. It was like they wanted to get that done beforehand. There were no other deals that sort of trickled through. So you're almost wondering, after this is the trade deadline going to essentially be, next week when this happens, right? You said there's only 5 or so more games before the actual deadline itself. So they've had a lot of time to prepare and plan here over these last couple of weeks. So you're almost wondering if this is an outlier season where we see some moves right away. I got the injury report up on the screen. Obviously, Greenway still day-to-day. Benson was day-to-day. Luukkonen was put on IR. Norris was, Lindy Ruff said that he's progressing. We'll see if he does able. He was like day-to-day in the game time decision those last couple of games before the break as well, but he didn't end up playing. So you're almost wondering that if he's not a lock for that first game back when against New Jersey when they start playing. So I know you mentioned a couple of those other guys as well, but you almost think that with a break like this, it's almost, other than the guys that have major injuries around the league, this really gives a reset for a lot of teams to get their guys healthy, knock on wood, any injuries that happen over at the Olympics, like Kevin Fiala.
Yeah, and like for especially a guy like, you mentioned Norris, Benson, but like this break is probably huge for a guy like Kesselring, who just has not been able to be 100% this year. Mm-hmm. Don't even know if this 2.5 week-ish break will be enough for him to get 100%, but it's definitely going to be enough for him to get maybe to 85, 90%, something that, we saw the flashes in a couple games before that break, and then he kind of pittered out in those last 2 games, really, really struggled. Like him and Bryson were abysmal in that Pittsburgh game, kind of the reason that they lost. So this break is huge for a player like him, but like I said, you only have 5 games, so you kind of need to be evaluating what you think this team needs and how you can improve this team now and act fast, because there's not really going to be a lot of times for teams like the Maple Leafs to kind of figure out if they're a buyer or a seller. So you're going to want to try and get on these teams fast and kind of add whatever you can add, because if you wait too long, not only does the market kind of dissipate, but you kind of lose out on your number one options. Again, a completely different mentality than we're used to seeing in Buffalo. We are not used to looking at, rentals, buying like a depth defenseman or even a depth forward. We're used to kind of selling. Buyer's market is something that it could be a little shell shock for the Sabres and us as fans, because we might see a move where the Sabres are giving up a big asset and we're like, oh, damn. But if it's the right piece, it's the right piece. And it's what Yarmo was here for. And I'm not expecting him to go hugely crazy, but I wouldn't be surprised if there's a depth defenseman and a depth forward add, 2 pieces coming in, because health up front has been a concern. And then just Lindy Ruff doesn't trust his bottom pair defenseman. So you need to get him someone that he can trust, because as good as the top 4 here have been, it's not sustainable to play those guys 28, 29 minutes a night while your third pair is playing 10. And we've seen it when Jacob Bryson played in a big game. He got manhandled against Pittsburgh. So
it was rough.
It's been rosy, but there's still some concerns here, especially because now we're so close to playoffs. There's 25 games left. We don't need to sit here and talk about what a playoff berth means for us as Sabres fans, because we know what that means. And I think Yarmo kind of owes it. Not kind of owes it. He hasn't been on the job that long, but like what a boost for Yarmo it would be for, them to make the playoffs with his first year at the helm.
It would. And you mentioned, the Torontos, the Floridas, Ottawas, Boston, they're all underneath Buffalo right now. Toronto and Florida specifically, those are 2 teams I think a lot of people had pegged at least for a top 3 spot in the Atlantic, let alone a wild card spot. So as you mentioned, if you're the Sabres, do you sort of see that as an opportunity to say, hey, those are 2 teams we thought we'd be under this year. And now that we're above them right now, we really need to capitalize on this.
Yeah. And it goes like to that point, not only do you need to capitalize on making the playoffs, this is a year when we've seen the Sabres, when they play at their best, they can beat anyone. This is a year where if you're Jarmo Kekalainen and Lindy Ruff and this Buffalo Sabres team, you think about winning a round or 2, because that is the opportunity that's in front of you. We know when the Sabres play at their best, they are a very, very good hockey. The teams in front of them, like we've seen them play against Montreal, we've seen them play against Tampa, we've seen them play against Pittsburgh. We know how they match up. It's a year where obviously, like Tuck said it. Tuck said they're not just thinking playoffs, they're thinking Stanley Cup. We know, that could turn around and be like a really bad omen for the Sabres if they don't make it. But I think he's not necessarily wrong. The East is pretty open. You get in, you don't know what's going to happen. And I think this team is talented enough to maybe win a round or 2. And that, again, would be huge, because it's been so long since they've even made the playoffs. Winning a round in their first year would not only do wonders for the fan base, it would do wonders for the players here, and it would make Yarmo's life so much easier, because he could then start adding to this team, and he has that chip in his pocket, like, hey, we just made the playoffs, did some damage, we're legit. So just really, really, not to overbear and state some hyperbole here, but like this next 25 games and how Jarmo handles his trade deadline is really, really big. And I hope he takes advantage of it. We know the type of GM that he is. I don't expect him to sit on his hands. I expect him to be active and bring in a couple pieces.
Yeah, you already said that there's going to be changes his first day on the job, right? Like he said that he needs to address certain things, and we'll sort of see how that goes at the break.